There are women who were born with the gift of feeling deeply. They sense what no one says, carry pain that isn't theirs, and silently believe they can heal the world through love. But there comes a moment, inevitable and sacred, when the body grows tired, the heart falls silent, and the soul begins to whisper, "Who heals you while you heal others?" Carl Jung once said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And perhaps this is what life is trying to teach you now, that compassion without limits becomes a prison, and that true love begins when you stop sacrificing yourself for those who haven't yet chosen to heal. This is the symbolic story of the woman who stopped saving others, not out of selfishness, but awakening. She discovered that the wound she had always tried to heal outside herself was, in truth, the portal to finding her own soul. Today, I invite you to walk with me through this profound journey, the journey of the wounded healer who finally learns to transform pain into wisdom and care into consciousness. Chapter 1. The Origin of the Wound, the Calling of the Caring Soul. Since ancient times, the feminine has carried within itself the instinct to nurture. It is an ancestral calling that dwells in the collective unconscious, the voice of the Great Mother, who embraces and nourishes all life. But when this sacred force loses balance, it turns into a silent burden, the unconscious need to save, fix, and heal everything around. In childhood, this energy begins to reveal itself. Perhaps you were that little girl who felt too much, who sensed the emotional climate of the house before a single word was spoken. While adults got lost in their own conflicts, you tried to bring peace, believing that if everyone was okay, you would be safe too. And that's how the wounded healer is born, the woman who learned to offer love as a currency for emotional survival. Jung would call this an unconscious maternal complex, when love becomes duty and caring becomes a way to earn belonging. In this phase, the feminine soul distances itself from its essence to become a mirror of others' needs. But with every act of limitless giving, something inside her fades a little. What begins as pure compassion slowly turns into emotional exhaustion. The archetype of the healer, when wounded, confuses love with rescue and compassion with self-abandonment. And while she tries to save the world, she doesn't realize that the emptiness she feels is, in fact, her own soul calling for healing. Chapter 2. When love becomes exhaustion, the shadow of compassion. There comes a point when love stops nourishing and starts consuming. It's the moment a woman realizes that no matter how much she gives, the other remains trapped in their own pain, and she, drained, feels invisible. Compassion, when stripped of boundaries, becomes a subtle form of escape, caring for others to avoid facing oneself. Jung said, "What we deny in ourselves ends up dominating us from the outside." And that's exactly what happens when the wounded healer ignores her own shadow. The need to save others is often a reflection of the denial of one's own vulnerability. Behind altruism lies a silent pain. The fear of not being enough unless she's taking care of someone. This is the shadow of compassion, love that learned to give but never to receive. And in that one-sided giving, unequal relationships are born, draining friendships, bonds that imprison rather than liberate. The woman who lives within this archetype feels guilt when she rests, shame when she says no, and fear of being selfish when she chooses herself. But beneath that guilt lies a deep truth. The feminine soul was never meant to lose itself in anyone. It was meant to love consciously, and every conscious love begins with a reunion with one's own shadow. Chapter 3. The Encounter with the Wound, the Mirror of Pain. Every healing journey begins when pain becomes a mirror. The woman who once sought to soothe others' suffering starts to perceive something mysterious. Every person she tries to heal symbolically reflects a forgotten part of herself. Those who disappoint her, those who don't listen, Those who seem incapable of returning love all mirror the same inner pattern, the primordial wound yearning for recognition. Jung taught us that the unconscious projects itself through relationships. What we refuse to see within ourselves, the world shows us through others. Thus the mirror of pain arises not as punishment, but as an invitation to awareness. The woman who begins to see this reflection stops asking, "Why do they do this to me?" and starts asking, "Why do I keep putting myself in this place?" It's a turning point. The victim becomes the observer, the savior becomes the student. She realizes that every disappointment was her soul's attempt to guide her back to her center, to remind her of the love she had always sought, her own. That is where true healing begins, for when she looks at her wound with compassion, she withdraws power from projection and begins to gather the lost fragments of her soul. Have you noticed this reflection in your life? Have you realized how the pains that repeat themselves are messengers of what still needs healing within you? Share in the comments what this awareness awakens in you. Perhaps your story will help another woman recognize her own mirror. Chapter 4. The Alchemy of Healing, Transforming Service into Being. There is a moment when consciousness awakens and everything changes, silently. The woman who lived for others begins to understand that love is not sacrifice, it is presence. She learns that she doesn't need to heal anyone to be worthy, that her value doesn't lie in what she gives, but in who she is. Inner alchemy begins when she redirects her energy from serving to being. Instead of asking, "How can I help them?" she starts asking, "What does my soul need today?" And that simple shift changes everything. Her vibration, her relationships, her very way of existing. In Jungian individuation, this is the point when the ego yields to the self, the deeper, integrated consciousness of being. Love ceases to be compulsion and becomes choice. Compassion takes the shape of boundaries, and boundaries paradoxically become love. Journaling exercise. Take a piece of paper and write down, honestly, 3 situations where you crossed your own limits to please or save someone. Then next to each one write, "Where does the other end, and where do I begin?" Read it silently. Feel what arises. That is your soul's voice, trying to restore balance. And if these words resonate with you, like this video, and share it with those who still confuse love with salvation. Because the more we awaken together, the lighter the path of the feminine soul becomes. Chapter 5. The Power of No, the Sacred Boundary of the Soul. Saying no is an act of love, but for the woman who has always lived through yes, this is a deeply initiatory learning. No is the symbolic sword that cuts the invisible cords of emotional dependence. It is the gesture that protects the inner temple from invasions disguised as affection. For too long, the feminine has been taught to shrink to fit, to yield to be accepted, to care in order to be loved. But there comes a moment when the soul awakens and realizes every yes said against herself is a small betrayal of her own heart. And it is in that moment that no blooms as a silent prayer, not of rejection, but of reverence for one's essence. Jung said, no one can enter a healthy relationship if they are not at peace with their own solitude. The power of no is born from that peace, from the sacred space where a woman reunites with herself and discovers that true love does not demand submission, but presence. The wounded healer archetype then begins to transform. She ceases to be the martyr and becomes the priestess, guardian of her own energy, aware that she can only offer healing from wholeness. And at that point she understands, to protect yourself is not selfishness, it is wisdom. To set boundaries is not to close off, it is to choose what truly resonates with your soul. And every no said with love is, in truth, a profound yes to life itself. Chapter 6. The Woman Who Returns to Herself. Individuation and Freedom. After crossing the mirror of pain and learning to protect her light, the woman returns to her center. But she is no longer the same. The one who once lost herself in everyone now recognizes her own face in the mirror of the soul. She no longer seeks approval or needs to be needed to feel alive. Her presence is enough. This is the final stage of individuation, the Jungian process through which a human being becomes whole, integrating shadow and light, wound and wisdom. The woman realizes that no healing exists outside herself, that every relationship merely reflects the one she holds with her own unconscious. In this rebirth, she transforms the pattern of rescue into loving presence. She no longer tries to save, she simply loves. She no longer carries, she simply holds space. She no longer demands, she simply flows. Now visualize this scene. You stand before the vast horizon of your own being. You feel the soft wind on your face, the sound of silence. With a gentle gesture, you return to the universe everything that doesn't belong to you. The inherited pain, the guilt that isn't yours, the expectations that once weighed on your shoulders, and as you release it all, you feel lighter, more whole, more yourself. This is true freedom. To live in harmony with what is, without trying to heal what isn't ready, without losing yourself to be loved. Because the woman who has returned to herself is now the sanctuary of life itself. Conclusion: the silence that heals. There comes a moment, at the end of every inner journey, when words are no longer needed. The woman who once screamed in silence now simply breathes. And in that simple act, everything transforms. Silence becomes sacred space, the cosmic womb where the soul rests and renews itself. Carl Jung said, "The soul heals when we are with it." And perhaps that is the true meaning of healing, not fixing, not understanding, not fighting, just being present, being with the pain, with the light, with the mystery that we are. The woman who stopped saving others didn't give up on love, she simply purified it. She transformed care into consciousness, empathy into discernment, and the wound into wisdom. Now she loves without losing herself, embraces without emptying herself, and lives without needing to prove anything. May this video remind you that healing doesn't happen in the noise of answers, but in the quiet of meeting yourself again. And if this journey touched your soul, share in the comments what it awakened in you. Subscribe to the Inner Sanctuary channel and share this video with those who also need to remember the most powerful love is the one born from inner silence.